Zoroastrianism, the religion of the good life, and we will be going on to chapter 9, the presiding genius of water. We have seen how tradition, problems with not understanding the language, and priestly interpretation has changed the tradition. But we go on to, I don't remember exactly where we are at the second. If by worship of a sacred element is implied reverence for it and glorification of it, then the Zoroastrian praying before the sacred fire for the blessing of longevity, strength, wisdom, happiness, and virtuous progeny unquestionably worships fire. Such veneration, however, does not imply that the object ordained is taken to be the supreme deity. And it doesn't even necessarily mean, if there's an entity of the fire, they're not even worshiping the fire, they're worshiping an entity associated with. But again, they don't have to be doing that. There's a place in Afghanistan where there are fire worshippers, but they're not the Zoroastrians. They're, what you'd call Hindus, and they both use the same center. It's one of the two most ancient ones, and they're both in Afghanistan, but I don't remember which one switched. Nor is such adoration inconsistent with a religious system based on monotheism, and it should leave little room for misunderstanding, especially in the view of similar homage paid by Zoroastrians to other sacred elements. Chapter 9, the Presiding Genius of Water. Well, if you worship other than God, or you treat anything like other than God, that's worship. I want you to deal with that. Veneration of water, another phase of nature worship. While using water sacred in a sacred context, again, isn't worshiping the water, has come down to the followers of the faith of Zarathustra from their Aryan ancestors. It must be remembered, well, if they're worshiping other than him, they're doing things too strictly, they're taking drugs, they're letting the priest take over instead of everybody being the priest and priestess, it's not really the faith of Zarathustra anymore, is it? Contains remnants of, like Sufi, you don't know how much Muslim they are, but they accept Muhammad on some level. It must be remembered, however, that water worship was imbibed rather than engendered by Aryan culture. From remote ages, man endowed trees, plants, stalks, stones, dales, hills, seas, and springs with spirits of visible and invisible. It was a stage in cultural progress through which he had passed, the stage which he believed in myriads of spirits whose ubiquity has been aptly characterized as an unholy travesty of the divine omnipresence. It was upon such a spirit world of prehistoric man that the primitive nature worship of the Aryans was based. Water to them was not only the prime necessity of life, but the very birthplace of life, worthy of worship as a divinity. In the Vedas, waters are called Apodevi. In the Avesta, Apovanguhish. Well, the entities of the waters, a different thing than the waters itself. Like Agni is fire, but Agni is also, so that's not as distinguished. The Gathas of Zarathustra, however, recognize no water deity. His purely monotheistic creed recognizes only one creator of the universe, of all the elements. O Wahura Mazda, he asked, who but thee created the waters? Who but thee created the waters and trees? In the later Avesta, however, we find the development of a regular cult of water worship, with the entity Eredvi Sura Anahita as the presiding genius of water. According to the conception of those times, the abode of waters was in heaven, and their descent from heaven was poetically pictured as the coming down of the fair maidens and daughters of Ahura, the Lord. To the nether regions, the Vestan people greeted these beneficent deities as Ahurani, the Vedic Asarani, just as the Babylonians hailed their so-called goddesses of water as Mylita, derived from Mul, Arabic Maula, the Lord. So Maula being someone who's in charge of affairs. So some people don't like spiritual masters being called Maula because it's definitely a word used for God, and so any term used for God, but again, we manifest those qualities in a lower sense in our lives. But it's very common in cultures. The ancient Egyptians had a female seated at the feet of the light beings. It wasn't that the light beings were female, it's just that is something that cultures time and time again tended to make the claim, oh, that they're the daughters of God and they're the, and they're female, but I don't believe either. Aredvi Sura Anahita. In the Aban Yasht, the river is addressed as a mighty goddess. Aredvi Sura Anahita, strong, sublime, spotless. Aredve Sura, being the name of a mythical river. She draws in the starry regions, and Ahura Mazda has assigned to her the work of guarding the holy creation just as a shepherd guards his flock. Is that river in Afghanistan that supposedly those who could speak 400 different sounds, like what we call anatomically modern human now, about 40,000 years ago, all had some degree of lineage coming from that one spot? I think it's somewhere in Afghanistan, this one river flows down from this mountain, and saw it on a show. Is that the river being talked about? Holy Christian just guards the flock. Ahura Mazda calls upon Zarathustra to worship Anahita. Well, to make mention of, who rolls under bridges, gives celebrity, defeats the Davas, professes the Ahurian religion, and who deserves praises and worship in this living world. Yeah, not really. But again, the old faiths creeping back in. It's like Confucius. Mencius was the one who basically put him entirely back in the Chinese culture. So how he differed, there's a lot of questions that can be raised. And by defeating the Davas, specifically Shayatin Minal Jinn, you have something interesting. The getting of ablutions, the getting of full, whether partial for a ritual or getting a full bath ritually, touching the water, and washing up for that is a very effective exorcism tool, as it's called. Yeah. Oh wait, I don't remember the second bit. Anyways, the widening, expanding, the healing, foe to the Davas of Ahura's faith, worthy of the adoration in the material world, worthy of mention in the material world, life increasing the righteous, herd increasing the righteous, food increasing the righteous, wealth increasing the righteous, country increasing the righteous, whom I, Ahura Mazda, by movement of tongue, brought forth for the furtherance of the house, for the furtherance of the village, town, and country. Aredvyasura Anahita has a chariot of her own, drawn by 4 great chargers, all of them white, and of the same stock, who defeat all tyrants, wicked men, sorcerers, witches, oppressors, as well as those who are willfully blind and willfully deaf. This is, of course, an allegory. We are told that the 4 steeds are the wind, the rain, the cloud, and the sleet, and that it was Ahura Mazda who made them for her. A vivid picture of this water spirit is drawn from the text. She is a maiden She is a maiden, handsome in figure and appearance, well-shaped, pure, and having a halo around her. Upon her head she wears a golden crown set with 100 stars and beautifully embellished. Golden earrings adorn her ears, a golden necklace decks her neck, and elegant bracelets illume her arms. Around her waist she has a girdle which lends additional grace to her beautiful figure, and she wears golden shoes to match her garment of gold. This word picture of the spirit of the waters has been described by some scholars as a faithful reproduction of Anahita's statues in stone and metal. It must not be supposed, however, that image worship was common in Iran. Idolatry in any form was repugnant to orthodox Zoroastrianism, and Iranian kings and heroes waged a crusade against idol worship. Herodotus testified, people of Iran knew no idols. And, that's why they call them fire worshippers. They show up and it's like, where are all the idols? Oh, they stand around a fire praying. And it's not too smart, these people. They might be trying to stay warm and comfortable and, things brightly lit around, No, that's not the conclusion they drew, but during the Achaemenian period, however, statues of different so-called divinities were not unknown, and statues were erected in honor of Aredvisura Anahita in Babylon, Ecbatana, Susa, Persepolis, Bactria, Damascus, and Sardis. Whether those statues were worshipped by the Zoroastrians of the time along with the other communities living with them, it is not possible to state with any degree of accuracy. The Aban Yasht recounts the names of the kings who give offerings to Aredvisura Anahita, and begged for various favors. Even Ahura Mazda, it is said, worshipped her in order to seek her assistance in inducing Zarathustra to become his prophet. Now, you can say, made mention of, had it formed a connection with, but people who don't understand some of these languages have gone to some conclusions, but Zarathustra mentions her with the Hayoma and the Berisman, with spells and libations, sorcerers inserting things into the religion, one would think, instead of Zarathustra. They had thousands of years before we have any record of these things being written down, possibly. Other votaries offer her 100 stallions, 1,000 oxen, and 10,000 sheep. Ha'ashinha Yima Thra'eta'ana Karasaspa, and a host of other monarchs, heroes, sages, and celebrities, all adore her and ask for diverse boons. The rulers pray for sovereignty over countries, the warriors for swift horses and victory in the battlefield, the priests and their disciples for knowledge and wisdom to answer the riddles propounded by heretics, and the priest who offers libations implores her to descend from the celestial abode to the altar and to grant riches, horses, chariots, swords, food, plenty to mankind. The wicked, however, could not hope to win her favors, as Dahaka, an incarnation of the evil spirit, implored her to endow him with strength to slaughter all the men on the surface of the earth and clear all the 7 zones of the human race, but she refused to grant this prayer. Similarly, boons solicited by other national foes of Iran are refused, and if we're talking a real light being, it doesn't have a choice in the matter. So sorcerers can't boss around the light beings because they get their commands from God. But we should, when we worship, yes, development, and yes, we have experiences and we want things in life, but let's go beyond that and be devoted for itself, not for powers, not for the answers that, I'll show them. It's like, Well, you want to have a good legacy, yeah, but it's not, I'll show them who knows who has the better philosophy. I'll make them have their words. No, um, that's not quite the right way you should put things. Penalty for defilement of water. It is sinful to contaminate water. Such an act offends the presiding spirit of the waters. Those who knowingly take dead matter to the waters become unclean forever. Should a man, while walking or running, riding or driving, happen to see a corpse floating in a river, he must go down into the river, ankle deep, knee deep, waist deep, and even full depth if need be, and remove the putrid body from the waters and place it upon dry ground, exposed to the light of the sun. Well, I think that has snuck its way in, but it is a good idea to an extent. Dead bodies corrupting the water source, and trying to figure out if there's a safe way to remove it. An ideal mode of worship. The homage originally offered to the waters of the springs is extended by modern Zoroastrians to the waters of the wells and the seas. In Bombay City, the stronghold of this small band of Zoroastrians, any day along the beach and at almost any hour of the day may be seen devout Parsis dipping their fingers in the water, applying it to their eyes and forehead, lifting up their hands in prayers to Ahura Mazda. Andrew Carnegie, I think that's how you pronounce it, Carnegie, has left behind an interesting description of such a sight witnessed by him in Bombay during a voyage round the world. This evening, he says, we were surprised to see, as we strolled along the beach, more Parsis than ever before, and more Parsi ladies, richly dressed, all wending their way towards the sea. Here on the shore of this ocean, as the sun was sinking into the sea, and the slender silver thread of the crescent moon was faintly shining on the horizon, they congregated to perform the religious rites. Fire was there in its grandest form, the setting sun, and water in the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean outstretched before them. The earth was under their feet and wafted across the sea. The air came laden with the perfumes of Arabi the Blessed. Arabi the Blessed? Surely no time or place could be more fitly chosen than this for lifting up the soul to the realms beyond seas. I could not but participate with these worshippers in what was so grandly beautiful. There was no music save the solemn moan of the waves as they broke into foam on the beach. But where shall we find so mighty an organ or so grand an anthem? How inexpressibly sublime the scene appeared to me, and how insignificant and unworthy of the unknown seemed even our cathedrals made with human hands, when compared with this looking up through nature unto nature's God. I stood and drank in the serene happiness which seemed to fill the air. I have seen many modes and forms of worship, some disgusting, others saddening, a few elevating. When the organ pealed forth its tones, but all poor in comparison with this, nor do I ever expect in all my life to witness a religious ceremony which will so powerfully affect me as that of the Parsis on the beach of Bombay. I remember when I was up on a mountaintop, it's like there was time we were stopping around. It's like, oh, it's how it is out here. There's just no need to pray. It's like, this is, I'll stop and pray whenever the time is. It's doing my evening prayer on a mountain, to the side of an observatory, and surrounded by nature, and it's a great place to feel the ritual. But a sanctified place certainly has its importance. But yeah, the art doesn't do it as much as getting into the ritual. Carnegie was but one of numerous visitors from the West who were thus captivated by this mode of worship. Samuel Lang sees in it an ideal opportunity to pay one's homage to the good spirit and to look into the abysses of the unknown with reverence and wonder. Here is an ideal religious ceremony, he observes, combining all that is most true, most touching, and most sublime in the attitude of man towards the great unknown. Compare it with the routine of an ordinary English Sunday, and how poor and prosaic does the latter appear. Well, certainly contrived rituals don't come out as well as ones that are revealed, or ones that are, very cosmic in their scope, that are traditional and in a natural setting and all that. And now, before I take my final leave of the reader, let me take a few moments, throw the reins on the neck of fancy, and suppose myself standing with that group of Parsees by the shore of the Indian Ocean, listening to its murmured rhythm, inhaling the balmy air, watching the silver crescent of the new moon, and musing on the wise sayings of the ancient sage. The sum of the reflections, which I have tried to embody in the preceding pages, would take form and crystallize in the following sonnet. Hail, gracious Ormuzd, author of all good, spirit of beauty, purity, and light. Teach me like thee to hate dark deeds of night, and battle ever with the hellish brood of Ahriman, dread prince of evil mood, father of lies, uncleanliness, envious spite, thefts, murders, sensual sins that shun the light, unreason, ugliness, and fancies lewd. Grant me, bright Ormuzd, in thy ranks to stand, a valiant soldier faithful to the end. So, when I leave this life's familiar strand, bound for the great unknown, shall I command my soul, if soul survive, into thy hand, fearless of fate, if thou thine aid will lend. Had those admirers of the Zoroastrian mode of worship been initiated into the esoteric meaning of the so-called worship of the elements, they might have appreciated all the more the Parsee's adoration of fire and water, the material fire and water, which he makes his bedbla, or altar of divine worship, prayer direction, his directioning, are but the symbols of the spiritual fire and water which he holds in the mind's eye. It is not the elements of fire and water which he worships. It is the spirits residing in these material elements, the spiritual fire and water, named respectively Atarsh, Putra, Ahura Mazdao, i.e., fire, son of Ahura Mazda, and Eredvi Sura Anahita, the righteous, shining, undefiled spirit of waters, that he adores. Well, respect, and without worshiping these things, you can, get into that sort of thing too. That fire is the fire which is in Gauran Mana, shining before Ahura Mazda, and that spirit of the waters, Aredvisura Anahita, is in the same way the spiritual source of all the waters that flow on the face of the world. Now, before I end, a quick note, we have, 3 ways. You have the exoteric, the literal, the forms and whatnot itself. You have the esoteric, the subjective, and then you have the ethnic. None of these ways have to conflict. They each have their value. Kshnatra Horahemasta Ashambaha Kamnamasta Ashambaha.